also holds a postgraduate diploma in business administration. Her interests are spending time with her family and friends and learning, staying active, volunteering with the community, and supporting youth sports. So I'm going to give the mic now to Debra. So welcome.
Present to you today, and I hope that you find this session informative and valuable. So on the topic of transformational leadership, we're going to explore transformational leadership concepts today. Just at a high level, we only have 45 minutes together, but I wanted to look at some key concepts and practices as well, and then just talk a little bit about driving for results, and also to check our mindset and to share our story. I also wanted to just talk a little bit about our case study within Edmonton Scottish United Soccer Club, because we have also gone through some critical transformation over the past couple of years. So I thought it might be a good case study for us to take a look at. So we'll just get started. I was exploring some quotes, I guess, as I was preparing for this session that were really relevant to the sport industry. And I found this one by Danica Johnson. And I found it was actually quite appropriate. And she says, transformational leadership is one of the most desired leadership styles in the sport industry. Leaders that embrace this approach put the followers' emotions, motives, and needs before their own. In sports, change is inevitable. It requires adaptation and survival in an ever-changing sport industry. And every year there are coaching, administrative, personnel, and rule changes within sport organizations. And as we think about what's happening over the past, year or so with the pandemic, we've had to adapt to all of that, but we've also had to adapt to, unpredictability. And we've had to adapt to different gameplay, different practices, even different season timelines, budget impacts, resourcing impacts, all of that. And I think we can all relate to this quote very, very much. So it's adaptation and survival there. But when we think about what transformational leadership is, it really causes change in individuals and social systems and develops leaders. Harvard Business Review says that the leadership is often the biggest source of resistance to change. This reluctance to change is regrettable because leaders must set the tone for any change management initiative. And if leaders do not embrace change, others might feel emboldened to ignore change as well. And in my experience, that is very, very true. It's really important that, in any change initiative, we work with leaders and help them to be transformational leaders as well. So thinking about some of the characteristics of transformational leaders, and please feel free to jump into the chat and think about your role models as we talk about some of these characteristics. So role models for transformational leadership, and maybe just type in some of those qualities in the chat as we go along. But what I've outlined here is that they tend to have a very high emotional quotient. They need to be able to relate to people and able to move people, to motivate people, inspire people. They need to be influential, innovative, accessible, and intrinsically driven, and of course, resilient. They're also excellent communicators. They provide clear direction. They're able to gain and lead supporters, challenge the status quo, remove barriers and roadblocks, make difficult decisions, have the ability to take the right risks, and they welcome and manage change. One of the leadership models that I find is quite easy to understand for many people and quite relatable is the Kouzes and Posner's model. They have a leadership challenge, and they have 5 aspects that they focus on. And these also apply to transformational leadership. Their key actions such as modeling the way, encouraging the heart, inspiring a shared vision, enabling others to act, and challenging the process. We need to remember to manage results, but to lead people. And it's really important as a leader, particularly when we're trying to, move transformation, is that we tend to be taskmasters, but we always have to remember that human component and leverage the collective mind. You can't be an expert in everything, and no one expects you to be. And so being able to really leverage the team for the skills, knowledge, abilities that they bring, and for the expertise that they bring, and be able to lead them so that they are empowered to be able to bring forward that value in the most meaningful way. We also want to be able to share knowledge and wisdom with others, because then everyone wins. I always say that, knowledge is power, right? But knowledge sharing is more powerful. And we want to be clear in communications and remove barriers as transformational leaders. When we're thinking about moving change through, it's really important that we identify what those barriers are and to be able to clear the path for our team to be able to move through that. So again, empowering our people and trusting our people and making sure that decisions are made. Our team relies on us very heavily to make decisions, and indecisions are decisions because they have consequences and results. So I hope this model is really something that you can remember, because it's quite easy and it covers all the key areas. And thinking about challenging the process is the last one that I mentioned. It's one of those things that really drives change. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the change curve. And this particular diagram I thought was quite helpful because it includes a number of different elements to the change curve. We have the J curve, which goes through the emotional states and actions when people are first shocked, and a little bit of denial, and maybe even some low mood and energy, until acceptance starts to become part of the picture and part of their norm. And until that happens, it's really that closing, that ending period of something that is no longer, which is really hard for people to let go of. And during that phase, we have to have clarity and empathy to be able to ensure that people know that we understand how challenging it is to go through any kind of change or transition or transformation. And then we start to move into the stage 2, where that transition really starts to occur and acceptance starts to pop up and motivation starts to form again. And this is the stage where we have the delta between the ending and the new beginning. And this is a really difficult place for people, because you can see that's where that J curve dips, and that delta is very difficult for people to navigate through. And that's where they need a lot of support. And it's very normal. It is, predictable. This is why this is a model that you can see time and time again when you look up change or transformation or anything like that, because it happens every time. But as we start to pull people along with us, and we need those visionary leaders, those transformational leaders, to be able to help to pull people along with us. And then they start to do a little bit of experimentation, and they start to identify some of their own capabilities that, oh, maybe this isn't such a hard thing, I can do this. And then that's the point where they make the decision. Again, that's the emotional state in action where that decision point is really critical, because then they accept the change. And that new beginning becomes more likely, more probable, and more acceptable. And so that capability continues to be built, and that knowledge is built. And then we start to see some real engagement. And that's where that new beginning starts. And the transformational leader's role is to help people to see that new beginning, to help them navigate through this change curve, and to lead them. And this applies not only for organizations, but it applies for personal transformation as well, because you can go through any type of example here and you'd see the same type of emotional experiences, the same closure on endings, the transition period where you need to bridge that delta, and then into the new beginning where you start to see the light of something that's possible. And through that whole process, again, remembering the keys to engagement around clarity and empathy and motivation and capability, and moving yourself into that place of knowledge and comfort. So I would encourage you and invite you to think about this from a personal perspective, a team perspective, and an organizational perspective, and any type of change or transition that you'd be working with. And Mia, just let me know if there's questions coming in at any point. You can feel free to jump in and let me know.
Sounds good.
Thanks. So I'm just going to move into the next section here, is that when we're thinking about leadership and, transformational leadership being the same, just wanted to put it in some very simplistic terms. And there's all kinds of leadership models out there, and I could have presented any number of them, but I think this one is really simple. And, we want to lead at our best. And so we want to be aware of how things are going. We want to encourage and engage our team and the folks that are around us. So whether that is, our coaches team, our, organizations team, whether that is our players team, just really be thinking about being aware and encouraging them, and then stepping in and, providing help when it's required, but also getting help when it's needed and not being afraid to ask. And then transforming our own habits, because it's important that how we show up in the world impacts those around us. And, negativity can fester a lot quicker than positivity. So we want to ensure that we check ourselves and that, we are recognizing our own, good and bad habits, and make sure that we choose our words and our actions wisely, because it is noticed. And so when we want to be leading at our best, whether it's, our personal best or our professional best, just to remember these key tips here. Another key component that, I think that leaders need to be always mindful of is the decision-making process and the decision-making framework. Without it, people will get, stuck, and they'll start spinning and not be able to move forward. And people in teams will get very frustrated when decisions aren't made. And as I mentioned earlier, is that an indecision is a decision, an inaction is an action, because it will result in consequences, whether intended or unintended. And so using an appropriate framework or decision-making process to navigate through that is really critical. And so, making sure that the problem is clearly identified and there's a problem statement that clearly defines what the issue is, and collecting all the information and the data to be able to support any type of option analysis that would be provided. And then identifying those options and alternatives to be very clear about what those choices are. And then weighing in on evidence and any kind of data that you can provide to support to make evidence-based decision-making will certainly enable the decision-making process. And then making sure that those there's a choice around those options, and that there's a recommendation, and there's a decision to move forward, and then to implement the action with a clear plan. It's always important to also evaluate the results of that decision. And if the results are showing that you're not getting the outcomes that you were hoping for, is at that point, you can always go back and try to go through that cycle again, because continuous improvement is critical. Anytime there's a decision is made, it is a snapshot in time. And things change, circumstances change, the context of the environment changes. I mean, look at us in the pandemic. We've all probably in our organizations, as we're working with our clubs and in the governing bodies, we've had to adapt, and we've had to shift our strategic and operational plans on a dime. And same with all the organizations that were, globally, they've had to do the exact same thing. So as long as you have the mechanism and the processes to be able to work through that, you'll be able to pivot quite easily. So use data-driven and evidence-based decision-making and manage the plan. Set goals, but also set stretch goals, because then you can, achieve beyond even what you had hoped for in what's possible, and measure those results, because what gets measured is what gets attention. So I think we all know the importance of decision-making, making sure that we have efficiency and effectiveness and productivity that is increased, And it also improves morale because, again, if we're not making decisions, people will get frustrated and they won't have a direction to move in, and you won't be able to get that momentum that you're looking for. So we want to be able to ensure that we've got effective decision-making management as well. So the next thing I'd like to touch on is just mindset. And I know that Eva is going to have a full session on this tomorrow. So I'm just going to touch on a little bit because it's really important as it pertains to transformational leadership. Because we want to check our patterns of thinking. We don't want to be afraid to fail because failure is required for learning. And when we're thinking about our players and our coaches, I know that this is the philosophy that most of you will have, because it's all about trying to ensure that you're allowing players the freedom to be able to try things and make mistakes, so that they can actually be able to build the skills and the things that are going to be winners for them. And, so I know that this is something that would be very familiar to all of you. But also don't be afraid to take massive imperfect action. Things don't have to be perfect the first time. In fact, they're probably never going to be perfect. But, through continuous improvement, that's where we're able to make some incremental steps to improvement and be able to get as close as we can to the desired state. So I wouldn't be afraid of that. Just, start, just jump in and start, and you'll learn along the way, and you'll teach yourself and others along the way as well. And just remember to remove those limiting beliefs, those things that tell us that, we can't, or maybe, we're not prepared enough, or we're not feeling confident enough, or that we don't have enough notice, or, these types of things that, give us a fixed mindset, and they limit our beliefs about what we can accomplish and what we can achieve. And so I would encourage you to, write in the chat maybe some things that can help you to take the first step to a growth mindset, or things that you're already doing because you might already be in a growth mindset where, failure is an opportunity, or failure is not an option, because you can work through that and you can learn as you go, that you can do anything you want as long as you try, and that challenges help to keep you growing and improving, and that your effort and your attitude and your desire to be able to learn are things that are going to carry you forward. And those things are more constructive, and they don't impair you from being able to achieve your goals. So definitely would encourage you to check your mindset, and remember that your mind is your greatest goal to achieving your resources in your life. And it's going to be the greatest resource that you can ever imagine beyond anything else. So remember your mindset and check your patterns of thinking. And the next piece I'd like to talk about is to share your story. As a transformational leader, it's really important to have that foundation in place, because you want to be able to share that with others, whether it's your personal story, or whether it's a vision or something that you want to accomplish that you think is going to be for the greater good or for the organization, and just really understand how to articulate that. So think about, what do you have in place? What's the core of that? Understand your contributions to the world, and know your skills, knowledge, abilities, and expertise. Be able to describe that and articulate that. Know who you serve and the solutions that you provide and the structures that you need to deliver this. And as in the previous session, the leaders around the table and the roundtable discussion talked about, don't be afraid to ask for what you need. And don't be afraid to articulate that vision, and to be able to build your clarity, which is going to build your confidence as well. Because if you have the foundations, you can thrive and you can pivot no matter what. So I would encourage you to get clear on your own story, and to think about how you can take the next steps to be able to share that story with others as a transformational leader. So quick case study. I know we're flying through this quite quickly, but 45 minutes does go by fast. I did want to share the story of Edmonton Scottish United Soccer Club as our case review for today. Just a quick couple of slides, because I think that this club has demonstrated transformational leadership quite exceptionally over the past number of years. And, we went through a planning exercise where we created a new business model because we had a vision, and that vision was growth. And that vision was to be able to ensure that we had pathways for male and female athletes, coaches, officials, staff, any way that we can ensure that we can provide those opportunities from an equal opportunity perspective and from a diversity perspective. We wanted to obtain our national youth license and to be able to really provide that experience and that programming, so that way we could provide pathways all the way from youth all the way through to even professional. And so we've looked at a 3-year strategic roadmap, and in 2019 this was our build. And we applied for the National Youth Club license at that point. And then we also joined the Edmonton Scottish Society as the youth club. And in 2020, we had a growth mindset here. And we wanted to provide progressive and modern youth soccer, as I mentioned, for female and male players and coaches with effective board governance. So we needed to also improve the governance that our board had. The board had matured from a very small club into something that was moving into the future through a growth opportunity. And then in 2021, which is where we're here now, we want to become a leader in Alberta and Canada youth soccer. So how did we get there? Our journey to here, in 2018, a new board was elected, and it was a complete turnover of the board executive and directors in January. We needed refreshed governance. We needed to update our bylaws. We needed to refresh our operations. So we did a governance review and an operational review at that time. And we also were, supporting the Scottish Society to be able to do the planning and construction of the dome. We've had many individuals within our club who supported, through that process. And, in the organizational review, we also did board training because we wanted to ensure that our board was ready to take on the future. Again, we did the bylaw review, we did policy reviews, operational reviews, we did financial fiscal reviews, the workforce review, because we were growing, we needed to understand when we needed to go forward, and also program and curriculum reviews. When we got to 2019, the board had been in place for a year. We were really focused on operations because we were a brand new board in 2018. We needed to learn the business. But by 2019, we started to be able to look at our growth, which was the beginning to exceed our operational capacity. So we really needed a new operating model. We looked at our strategic and operational planning. We applied for the club license at that point, which is what we were planning previously. And that's when the dome opened. So this was also a game changer for us. There was a lot more community awareness of the potential of the youth club, and the development of the 3-year strategic plan really started to take hold. Then when we got into 2020, of course, the pivot and, the pandemic hit, and we had to, like all of you, we struggled to, face the challenges, to deliver the services differently. And, we were awarded the National Youth Soccer license at that point as well. And so we had, things that we needed to meet in terms of requirements to be able to maintain our license. So we adapted to, different regulations, gameplay practices, the season timelines, unpredictability. Our budget was much different. We had to apply for grants. We need to look for operational sustainment and staff retention strategies. We developed online programming. We further developed our player curriculum because we had an opportunity with the staff that we had to be able to focus on some of those areas while we were in the pandemic and not quite as busy in operations that we normally would have been. And we invested in technology, such as the technology that we're using today with Fit by TV, so that way we could stream games and other events such as the the symposium that we're in today. So we also developed new bylaws and expanded our board membership with key competencies. We brought on people who had some technology backgrounds, people who had marketing and social media backgrounds, and a variety of other things that were really going to help us to move forward. And we also strengthened the technical and the coaching staff, and we've elevated, our executive director to be able to be empowered to lead the operations of the club. And we're also increasing our use of digital platforms. So here we are now at the turning point to achieve our 3-year strategic plan. And we've met everything that we had laid out in that plan. And, we focused on key partnerships and player pathways. And, now we need to go into another strategic planning session. So that way we can continue on for the next 3 years, where we want to enhance coach access to training and lead virtual development summits, lead and sponsor Women in Soccer Symposium as we are today, and continue this momentum and move forward. So I think this is a really great case study for transformational leadership. And what I would invite all of you to do as well is to think of the kind of leader that you are and what kind of leader that you aspire to be, and perhaps some of the tools and resources and tips that you have available to you to be able to move in that direction. So with that said, I think we can open up the Q&A, Mia, if there's any questions at all.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for that, Debra. We've got a couple questions here for you. The first one is, can you speak to vulnerability and how that might impact transformational leadership and the approach?
Yeah, so, I think as a transformational leader, that vulnerability always exists, because you really have to put yourself out there, and you have to be able to take, risks, but you want to be able to take calculated risks. So again, going back to the evidence-based decision-making, using that as leverage and support, but also being able to really clearly articulate the vision and to bring, the folks along with you who are supporters. Surrounding yourself by, with the right people and the right team is really critical as well, and empowering them, because I think vulnerabilities exist when we perceive weaknesses in ourselves. And, if we have the right team around us, those vulnerabilities don't exist in the same way, because my strengths are different than, some of the people on my team. And then I can elevate them in their areas of strength. And so it rounds out the team, and it rounds out the opportunity to be able to deliver on the vision and the outcomes.
Thank you, Debra. And then we've got one more here. From your professional experiences, what are the most common mistakes you see leaders often make?
Yeah, so I think that one of the areas that really diminishes a team's morale is micromanagement, and not empowering them to be able to rise to the occasion and to be able to really provide the value that they can with their skills, knowledge, abilities, and expertise. You can't be everywhere. You can't be, you can't possibly know everything, right? So I think that, for leaders that I have seen in the past that really struggle with their teams and leadership, there are people who are afraid to show the vulnerability or to admit when they don't know everything. And nobody expects us to know everything. We can't possibly. So I think that those are the key areas, and being able to clearly communicate, having those touch points. Every day I have a 30-minute huddle with my team, and we talk about, key activities and deliverables that we need to move forward, but we also talk about key areas that are causing challenges that they need to raise and that I need to help them to remove those barriers. So we have open communication, we have honest communication, we have frequent communication, but I don't extend it, past the duration of the meeting that's required, because then they feel like, they would feel like their time is being wasted. they have, a lot of things to do. They're very busy. So a quick 30-minute huddle for me is an effective tool that really helps the team to be able to be connected and make sure that everybody is aligned every day.
Thank you, Debra. I don't think we have any more questions, but we can wait a minute or two to see if we get any more.
Sure, no problem.
However, I have a question
Okay.
for myself, actually, because I was listening through the whole presentation. You mentioned that in your presentation with the steps that you need to build yourself to get up to that leadership where you wanted to do, there's acceptance and all the things that you need to go through before you get there.
The change curve, yes.
Yes, that's the curve. Do people often cheat their way in to beat the curve, or do they have to go through all those steps to kind of get to where you need to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we definitely go through all the steps, but the rate at which people go through the steps is different. You'll have people who are, on the front, right? And they're ready to go and they're already ready for the change. You don't have to convince them, right? Those are the leaders. And those are the people that you want to build as champions to help, to bring the other folks along because they're already supporters. For the people who are, laggards, who are sort of, not quite convinced that the change needs to happen, they're going to go through that change process a little bit slower. And, there's no right or wrong here. It's just, where people are at any given time. And so I think that the more that we can help to support those individuals, the better, because we don't want them sitting in that bottom of that curve, because, that creates a lot of frustration. It can create, a lot of negative emotions. It can create, for some people, even, a bit of low energy, depression type of feelings. And so if the change is inevitable, we want to be able to help to lift those people and bring them along in a better way. So, definitely everybody goes through that to some degree, but the pace at which people go through is definitely personal.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you, Debra, for being here tonight and taking the time to present Transformational Leadership. I think we are going to be closing off soon. So if there's anything else that you'd like to say, now would be the time to say it.
Thanks so much for inviting me here today. And thanks so much to all the participants today. I look forward to the next sessions.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.